What exciting thing is Paul going to tell the people in the Hebrew language? That's what we're going to find out today in Acts 22. We saw last time that Paul made his way to Jerusalem. He was brought into the Antonia fortress where he was going to be held, and he asked if he could speak to the people. He said, I don't think that the Romans cared that much about internal Jewish struggles. And so maybe they thought, well, if we could just let him have some time to explain himself, to explain, what he's thinking, maybe we can calm this situation down in a different way. I don't know. But anyway, they did. They brought him back down the stairs. Like I said, the hole for the stairs is still there. The stairs themselves are not there. And that's where we left with this big, exciting cliffhanger about what was going to happen next. Well, Paul now addresses the people in Hebrew, and he tells them this whole story. Born in Tarsus, educated at the feet of Gamaliel, who's a well-known rabbi, known to this day, and he was someone who was important in the Jewish tradition. He is a well-known rabbi, and he was very strict about the words of God. He said, I learned it all. I persecuted all the way, finding prisoners, bringing them back here, and doing all these things. This whole story, he tells them about how he went out to persecute the early church. Persecuted people like Stephen. We believe, and it says that they put the cloaks at the feet of Paul. He's there. Maybe he was ordering it around, but either way, he was a big part of this. And he was on his way to Damascus. He's telling them all this to go find people who escaped our clutches and haul them back here to Jerusalem. The whole story. And then how Jesus asked him, why are you persecuting me? He is persecuting people, but Jesus saw it and said, you're persecuting me by persecuting my people. He saw the light. He didn't understand it. He didn't know what he should do. And he tells this whole story about everything that happened to him. Then he got sent to go to the Gentiles far away. He said that right up to that point, they were listening to him. And now, as soon as he said, I got sent to the Gentiles to teach them about Jesus, now they're yelling, they're raising their voices. They want this person gone from this earth. He shouldn't be allowed to live. And they were flinging things at him, throwing things at him, saying, throwing their cloaks, on the ground and in the dust. And so he tries. He's trying to give them this message that says, hey, I get it. I was in your spot too. I was doing the very same things you were doing. I was trained by the best there was when it came to rabbis in the temple. But this is what happened to me. Here's my experience, right? When we witness, we are telling people what we saw, what we witnessed. Like if you're witness to a crime, you say, I saw this, right? But he's confessing these things that he did, to the church people, how it was wrong and how he was sent away, sent to the Gentiles, and thinking that no one was going to accept this message. The tribune brought him back in because now people are riled up and suggesting that we have to examine him by flogging him, which means they're going to interrogate him with beatings. That's not great. And they wanted to know why these people are yelling at you. Why are they so angry with you? So they stretch him out. And then this is like where the whips with the barbs were going to be used on him. This is just not whipping. This is much, much worse. And Paul said, to the centurion, can you flog a man who's a Roman citizen and not be condemned? Or brought to a tribunal and a court case? He's a Roman citizen. You can't do this to him. And when the centurion heard that, now they're panicked. Oh no, what are we going to do? We just did these things you can't do to a Roman citizen. And now they're in trouble. So the tribune, the head, comes back in and asks, are you a Roman citizen? And Paul says, yes, I am. And the tribune didn't understand it. He says, I bought citizenship with a large sum of money. How did you get to be a citizen? And it's true that many Jews were not citizens. But Paul's like, nope, I was this way from birth. I didn't have to buy it. I have always had this. And so then they all had to leave. They can't whip him now. they can't punish him unless they give him a fair trial as a Roman citizen. When you think about citizenship, right? You think about citizenship in our own country. Citizenship is an agreement, right? That we will act in X number of ways and the government will treat us in these ways. And we sort of, it's a contract between the people and the government in that sense. And Roman citizens had that. It's probably where we got it from. The idea is that Roman citizenship initially was going to be from people that were citizens of Rome or citizens within that area of Italy. Later on, it started expanding it, rewarding people in these outlying areas with, people who are important, good behavior with citizenship. Or even like the tribune said, he paid for his. So there were other ways of getting citizenship. I was watching a thing about how the barbarians in some cases, because they had defended Rome with their soldiers, were given citizenship. So it happens, but it's not even just that Paul was made a citizen. He was born that way, so his parents were already citizens. So then they realized, they made a mistake. They bound a man without a court case. So the next day they wanted to know, well, why are the Jews so mad at you? They unbound him. They commanded the chief priests and the consuls to meet, and they brought Paul down, and it says they set him before them. They wanted to know what's going on here. What is happening? I think they wanted to avoid formality. I think Paul wanted to stay in Jerusalem. It must be hard. The very people he was a part of are now doing this to him. It's a reflection of Jesus who saw his own people turn on him. And I think Paul's going through that very same thing. But I know that Paul wanted to talk to them. That's why he spoke to them in Hebrew. He wanted to say, I was one of you. Jesus, same thing, was saying, I'm one of you. But you know what? I'm going to go far away from the city and talk to the Gentiles. We've seen other people, other preachers too. But he knew that he had to go talk to the Gentiles. In my mind, I think Paul must have wondered, I know how to talk to Jewish people. I could talk to them. They'll get me. We're all in the same group together. But now we see that it was never going to work the way that Paul hoped it was going to work. And I think he's finally understanding. I think you get frustrated, right? You think, all I have to do is say these words, they'll get it. They'll understand. I understand now, and they'll understand me. And it's sad and disappointing. People in history have been angry about those situations where they thought, I know how to talk to these people. I'm going to say these things and they will get Jesus. They will finally understand him. And when they don't, they walk away angry, vengeful, say bad things. And, they were wrong because people's hearts are in different places. You can't just say the right thing and think that people are going to turn from where they're at. But anyway, people who are dead set against Jesus, they are probably not even going to listen to a word you say. They won't understand it. They won't accept what you're going to say, even if it made sense. We saw places where Paul talked to synagogues, and it said that the synagogues were going through and looking up what he said. They were piecing through what Paul was telling them, and other groups that were just like, nope, not listening to you. So you kind of get that idea. So anyway, the people were not going to be convinced. They didn't want to listen to what Paul was going to do. And so we find out what happens with this conversation that we started here in Acts 22. What I'm going to meditate on this week is how Paul must have felt, standing before his own people, speaking their own language, sharing this deep information about his life and what happened to him and this miracle that happened on the way to Damascus, and then only to get rejected with rage. I think that way too, that if I told people, about my story and all that, you think in your head, oh, they will understand and they'll be excited about what happened to me. And instead, that's not typically what happens. People will respond in anger, in rage, when you go away from believing what they believed. And you have to meditate on those moments in your own life where you think, if I just said the right thing, they'll understand. And kind of sit with that disappointment for a moment. Not to dwell in it, but I guess to understand it and to understand that even Paul went through this, even Jesus went through this, that he wasn't able to change every heart that he confronted. And the idea that God sends us where we're needed and where he knows we are going to do the best, not necessarily where we feel more confident. The idea that you might think, well, hey, I'm raised Jewish. I could talk to Jewish people much more easily than I could talk to anyone else. And you will realize that you may actually get so much anger back at you that that may not be the right group to talk about. So Paul thought he could do that because he was once aligned with them. Jesus knew that he would talk to his own people and they would reject him. So he talked to other places in foreign areas, to unexpected people. He knew he's God, but Paul and that heartbreak of that. So I think, meditate on yourself. Where do I feel reluctant to go? But maybe that's where God is sending me, not to the familiar, but to the unfamiliar for a greater purpose in that. And what I'm going to pray about is to get that courage that when God calls me to speak, even if I don't know what I'm going to say, I don't know how my words are going to be received, whatever situation it is, to help me trust the Spirit, that the Spirit will not only guide my words, he will comfort me from my fears, and he will. We know that the results are in his hands, not mine. So let that be a faithful message to anyone who's listening. And for the Lord to protect my heart, from bitterness. I think when we get rejected, ignored, misunderstood, like Paul did, like Jesus did, it means that we are faithful, but we're going to not measure ourselves by applause or agreement or counting. My pastor had a sign on his door that said, God so loved the world that he didn't count his sheep. It wasn't about numbers. It was about faithfulness. And so help me to see that sometimes rejection is not a failure, but a redirection, or it's a seed that was planted that may not seek fruition for a long time. I know, like I said, a lot of people preached the gospel to me as a kid in school, and I never became a Christian until I was 20 years old. So it takes time. So I hope that I have Paul's perseverance, understand Jesus' love, not only for me, but for the people that I'm going to talk about. That's the idea, that for even those people who throw dust in the air at the sound of Jesus' name, to remember God loves those people. And what I'm going to share with others is the idea that you're just not passing on information when you share your faith, you're offering transformation, that it sometimes stirs resistance before it eventually creates renewal inside the heart. And this week, you should think about when you tell the truth with love, knowing that the initial reaction does not define your obedience, but doesn't even define the outcome of what this conversation is going to be. Like I said, I speak at this Christian college, and a lot of people come to me after the class sad, frustrated. I talked to my father. He wouldn't listen to me. I talked to my friend from high school, wouldn't listen to me, mad at me, that kind of thing. But that's not the end, right? That is just planting the seeds. That's just the beginning of the conversation. And so don't take it personally. Just keep doing it in obedience. Sometimes sharing the gospel puts a pebble in someone's shoe. That was from the book Tactics. That you're not injuring them, but you're making them walk a little bit differently. You're sort of poking them with that thought for a long period of time, even at the beginning when it's agitating. You have a pebble in your shoe. It's not comfortable. It's not something you want. But the more and more it pokes at that person, lingers with them, nudges them, it might finally lead to change. So don't underestimate the power of holy irritation, right? You might have irritated a person, but that irritation might lead to, I don't know, a pearl in their lives. See, I kind of made that up right there. But that's the idea, that we are going to not look at the results. I just did a podcast for Start with Small Steps that was talking about creating your own scoreboard. Look at Jesus' scoreboard. Look at what Jesus puts on the scoreboard, and it's not counting people, and it's not immediate wins. So just keep that in mind. All right, everyone, thanks so much. I appreciate you watching, listening. I hope that if you have questions, you'd email me at jill@startwithsmallsteps.com. I'd love to hear from you. And I'd love to know what you're thinking about this chapter. Did something else catch your eye that I didn't mention? I'd love to hear from it. Thanks so much. Have a great day.